gentlemen, please welcome today's organist, former Civic organist, Mr. Jared Jacobson. Good afternoon and welcome to another concert on San Diego's unique and historic Spreckels Outdoor Pipe Organ. My name is Dale Sorensen. I serve as organ curator. First-time visitors are often interested in the brief history of this great facility. Both the organ and the building were a gift of the sugar heirs Adolph B. and John D. Spreckels. The organ was first played on New Year's Eve, ushering in 1915 at the opening ceremonies of the Panama, California exposition that was held here in Balboa Park. The organ has been in continuous use these past 100 years. The instrument was built by the Austin Organ Company of Hartford, Connecticut. When originally installed, it contained 46 ranks. Now through subsequent additions, it contains 76 ranks or over 4,700 pipes. The largest pipes are 32 feet in length, the smallest about the size of a pencil. All the sounds you hear are natural sounds produced by compressed air energizing pipes or actual percussion instruments being struck by organ mechanism. There is no electronic tone generation or amplification of the organ at all. These programs are presented throughout the year at this time between 2 and 3 every Sunday afternoon by the City of San Diego Park and Recreation Department in cooperation with the Spreckels Organ Society. The Spreckels Organ Society is a grassroots group of volunteers that has come together to preserve, program, and promote this unique world treasure. To further their work, the Spreckels Organ Society operates a little gift shop, which you see here on the West Colonnade, with a wonderful variety of souvenirs only available here at the pavilion. Everything from apparel to recordings, even a fine history book on the organ. Be sure to check that out. Also, Spreckels Organ Society offers our umbrella service down here, and Matt and Jim Buckles are down there helping with that. For a mere $2 donation to the Society, you can rent an umbrella for the hour-long concert and have some protection from our beautiful sunshine, but hear the full sonic glory of the organ straight out as it's intended to be heard. Yeah, you can kind of hear it on the sides, but it's not what you hear out here in front. So if you really want your organ fixed today, get an umbrella and head on out here. Our Civic organist, Carol Williams, is away today, and so kind of a quick thing, but in her absence, we're so pleased to have our former Civic organist, Mr. Jared Jacobson, fill in. Jared is a consummate musician, great ability, wonderful musicology, history on anything he's playing. He can play the same pieces every week and we hear them differently because he gives us a wonderful different description of them. So he's put together a very varied program, interesting for us today. And so just enjoy what Jared has to offer. It's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Jared Jacobson.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome. I'm just curious, how many people are here from outside of San Diego? How many people are here from outside the continental United States? Welcome to all of you. How many people are here who have never heard an organ concert before? All right, well, I hope you're in for a treat today. The Christian world is littered with saints. There's a saint for just about everything you could think of, from finding a good parking place to the patron saint of lost causes. The saint of music has always been Saint Cecilia. And in 1692, Henry Purcell, who was the most famous composer of his time in England, wrote an ode to Saint Cecilia, a song that celebrates music, and in it he talked about the wondrous machine that is the organ. To be fair, Purcell was talking about a very modest instrument compared to the one that's here in Balboa Park. But we borrowed that phrase, wondrous machine, and asked a local composer to write a piece about it, which we premiered at the birthday party of this organ on New Year's Eve, just past, when it turned 100 years old, called Wondrous Machine. Today's theme is the Wondrous Machine, and I want to show you a little bit of what it can do, dissect a little bit of the organ so that you can get a sense of how the thing works. It is the largest and the grandest of all the musical instruments. Some composers refer to it as the king of instruments. Hector Berlioz said, no, it was better than that. It had to be the pope of all of the instruments. As organs go, this is not an enormously sized one. It is the second largest outdoor pipe organ in the world. There are other organs, indoor organs, even here in San Diego that are larger than this one, but it makes a wonderful sound. So I'm going to open with a barn burner of a piece. This is the most famous piece anybody's written for the organ so far, the great Toccata and Fugue in D minor of Johann Sebastian Bach. There is some cloud over the authorship of this. I choose to believe that Bach actually wrote it, unlike some of my colleagues who said it was borrowed from somebody else. I think Bach wrote it because it does everything that you want an organ to do if people have never heard one before. Sudden sound and sudden silence. And very near the beginning, there's an apocalyptic note in the bottom of the organ that you play with your feet, and chords that begin stacking on top of that. Bach loved to solve musical puzzles, create musical puzzles, and so when he's done having fun with the organ, which is the toccata part, comes from an Italian word meaning to touch the organ, then he writes a fugue, which is a musical puzzle where voices are stacked upon each other. It's not as beautifully worked out as later he would do this, but I choose to think this is a young man showing his oats and having a wonderful time at the organ. If you've never heard a pipe organ before, this is a wonderful introduction to it. The Toccata and Fugue in D minor of Bach. Hard to beat that for the organ. The second most famous piece that anybody's written for the organ so far, you'll hear at the end of this program today. That was the Bach Tocatta and Fugue in D minor. The organ is basically a box of whistles. As Dale Sorensen, our curator, told you at the very beginning, none of the sounds of this organ are electronically generated or electronically amplified in any way. All of the sounds you've heard so far are made with air rushing through tubes that are shaped just like whistles. It's the same principle as you use when you whistle as a human being. You get air with your lungs, you compress it inside your body, you send it out through a passageway, it goes out of your mouth, and you hold your teeth in a certain way so that you create a sound wave, and if you're lucky, it all comes out sounding like a whistle. This organ has about 5,000 of these whistles. The longest ones are 37 feet long and almost as big around as an old-fashioned telephone booth. The smallest whistles are about the size of a number 2 pencil, but the part that actually makes the sound is much smaller than the eraser at the very top of that pencil. The larger the pipes, the lower the pitch. The higher the pipes, the shorter the pipes, the higher the pitch. The pipe organ, any pipe organ of reasonable size, has a much wider dynamic range than than a full symphony orchestra. We can play an octave below the double basses in the orchestra, and we can approach the limits of human hearing, and even go beyond that into bat and dog territory in terms of the high frequencies. All of this is to create a cloud of sound, a palette of sound with which the organist paints, just like you use your box of Crayolas when you're a little kid to color pictures at the dining room table. This is the 64 color box of Crayolas. It's the 128 color box of Crayolas. I've been playing this organ off and on since 1978 when I first sat down at this bench. And I am still finding new ways to put these colors together. It just enchants me every time I sit down. It's not all about the loud. The next piece is all about the soft. This is a piece designed to paint a picture in your head. It's called Fountain Reverie. So imagine a quiet garden with a fountain babbling in one corner or maybe in the center. We have wonderful gardens like this sprinkled out throughout Balboa Park. Last night I was having dinner with a friend who has a new apartment, and in one corner of his terrace there's a quiet fountain sort of bubbling away. That's what this piece is all about. It uses the quieter stops of the organ, and it uses an acoustical phenomenon called the celeste, which means if you have a set of pipes over here tuned to the regular scale we're used to using, and you have an identical set over here that are tuned just a little bit different from that, these pipes will try to make these pipes suck over to this pitch, and these pipes will try to make those pipes suck over to that pitch. And what happens in the middle is this wonderful shimmery sound that sounds an awful lot like violins in an orchestra. Fountain Reverie by an English composer named Percy Fletcher. Next we'll deal with the trumpet stops of this organ. We have a whole variety of those. These are the party horns of the pipe organ world. And they can be very little and dainty and sparkling like Baroque trumpets, like you would hear in a performance of Handel's Messiah. Or they can be very dramatic French trumpets like you would hear in late 19th century and early 20th century French organ music. And they can be sassy and snarly like you hear on early Spanish instruments, where the idea was to portray battle scenes and to shoot the trumpets back and forth and sound from one side of the church to the other, and also from the front to the back. And then we have a very special set of trumpets that we added for the centennial of this organ, which will come in the piece after this next one. This will be a familiar piece to many of you. This is a trumpet voluntary. It is by Jeremiah Clark, but many of you may know this as Purcell's trumpet tune. That's because Purcell was the most famous musical figure in England at his time, and nobody could get anything published that didn't have his name on it. And two of his assistants were also writing really cool music. One was Jeremiah Clark and the other one was John Stanley, but if you wanted audiences to listen to it, you had to put your teacher's name on it. So Purcell's gotten the credit for this piece for a very long time. It doesn't matter really who wrote it, but this is just a wonderful sort of bounce around the world of Baroque music. The chord structure is very clear, and it's very ceremonial. You can picture royal weddings and ceremonial occasions of all kinds. different kind of trumpet sound now. This is a wonderful new stop that we added for the birthday of this organ. It's called the Centennial Tuba, centennial of course for 100th anniversary. A tuba is a very grand brass instrument. You'll see them in the kind of the back of the brass section. They're still small enough to hold in your lap, but the bell points up and the bell is about this big around, and they make a wonderful sound unlike anything else in the orchestra. A 19th century composer named Richard Wagner was so in love with these tubas that he started tinkering with not only the sounds that they could make, but also with the instruments themselves. And he developed a whole kind of a family of tubas called the Wagner tubas. He also lucked out because he caught the attention of a crazy man with a ton of money, Mad King Ludwig of Bavaria in Germany. And Wagner talked Ludwig into building Wagner a custom opera house so that the music that Wagner was writing could be presented exactly the way Wagner intended it.